Andrew Johnson was our 17th President of the United States, and he became president after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He was the first president to gain the presidency because of assassination. The Civil War was just about over, and it would be Andrew Johnson's job to rebuild the South during this period called Reconstruction that lasted 1865 to 1877. Lots of Northerners, they didn't really trust Andrew Johnson, this Reb, this guy from the South, because at one time he owned slaves. He was a slave owner from the South. He was regarded as stubborn and ambitious, and he really wasn't a good listener and really didn't have too many friends. And this was the guy that was going to lead the country, and a lot of people felt ripped off because, hey, they didn't vote for him. They voted for Abraham Lincoln. Andrew Johnson served 2 terms in the U.S. Senate from Tennessee, and he's noted by marrying at a younger age than any other president when he married Eliza McArdle on May the 5th, 1827. He was only 19 years old. Andrew Johnson never really attended any school, and man, he could barely read or write, and it was his wife who taught him how to read and write at about age 17, a couple years before he was married. The Civil War had been going on for a few years when in 1862 Abraham Lincoln appointed him governor of Tennessee because he was a devout Unionist. He said, "Then let us stand by the Constitution, and in preserving the Constitution we shall save the Union." And so Abraham Lincoln liked this. He liked the fact that we had a Southern boy down there supporting the United States of America, and so he was nominated to be vice president in 1864. Of course, nobody dreamed that he would become president, and he took the oath of office when Abraham Lincoln died on April 15, 1865. A couple problems when he took the presidency. Right off the bat, his wife became an invalid, and it was his daughter Martha who had to act as the White House hostess. But his biggest problem was the question, what are you going to do with the South? How are you going to rebuild the South that had been devastated by the Civil War? What were you going to do with that? Now, Andrew Johnson, he knew that Lincoln, he had a kind of a gentle Reconstruction plan before his assassination, and he made it clear that he favored a lenient Reconstruction policy. Even while this horrible war was going on, Lincoln considered, how are you going to treat the Confederate States when the Union wins? In 1863, Lincoln announced his proclamation of amnesty Reconstruction plan. Some people called it the 10% plan. Under this plan, government would pardon all Confederates except high-ranking Confederate officials who have been accused of some kind of war crimes against prisoners. But it was a gentle Reconstruction plan. This 10% plan kind of just stated, hey, as soon as 10% of the people would take an oath of allegiance to the United States of America, hey, they could form a new state government and send representatives and senators to Congress. Lincoln intended this 10% plan to make the South's return to the United States easy and as quick as possible. On March 4th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, he kind of described his hope for a reunited States of America when he gave his inaugural address. And this is what he said: "With malice toward none and charity for all." That's forgiveness. Man, can you imagine somebody that did something so horrible to you, and you would let them up easy like that, with malice towards none and charity for all? And then he said, "Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves with all nations. That's Abraham Lincoln. That's how he wanted to treat the South, with malice towards none and charity for all. Boy, if we just applied that to our life, just that one thought, I think our life would be a little bit richer. Forgiving, not be so practicing so much condemnation to others. I think Abraham Lincoln truly was one of the great presidents in history. Unfortunately for the South, Abraham Lincoln is assassinated, and now Reconstruction is going to take place. And Congress, they wanted to be responsible for that, led by somebody called Thaddeus Stevens, who was called a radical Republican because of what he wanted to do to the South and kind of make them pay the price for waging war against the United States of America. But most of all, these radical congressmen, they wanted to give full citizenship, the right to vote to former slaves, and to build schools and hospitals and to get the former slaves involved in government. The Wade-Davis bill proposed that Congress should be responsible for Reconstruction and not the president. Andrew Johnson's Reconstruction policy just stated, it was pretty simple. Just if each southern state would just declare that what they did was illegal in this Civil War thing, swear alliance to the United States of America, and ratify the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, they could come back into the United States, become involved once again in government, and let bygones be bygones. The radical congressmen were really upset with Andrew Johnson because he never talked about their voting rights, he never promised any land or building of schools, and when he pardoned more than 13,000 former Confederates because he believed that white men alone must manage the South, and he thought that these former slaves should never gain the right to vote, to put it mildly, he really upset the radical northern congressmen. Boy, what we can see is a really good example of the struggle between the executive branch and the legislative branch over this issue of Reconstruction. Andrew Johnson kind of called the deal done. Reconstruction was over. The South is back in the United States. No problems. The North said, hey, nothing had been addressed, and they were upset. Andrew Johnson, he vetoed what Congress wanted to do regarding Reconstruction 29 times. That's still a record, and Congress overrode the presidential veto 15 times, and that is a record. So boy, Congress and the president fighting over this issue of Reconstruction. Boy, what we can see is a really good example of the struggle between the executive branch and the legislative branch over this issue of Reconstruction. Andrew Johnson kind of called the deal done. Reconstruction was over. The South is back in the United States. No problems. The North said, hey, nothing had been addressed, and they were upset. The Tenure of Office Act stated that the president couldn't remove any cabinet officer during the term of his presidency because they were appointed by Lincoln, not him. And this was really to protect Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, who supported the radicals. Johnson fired him anyway, this stubborn old president, and Congress then initiated impeachment proceedings. Now, impeachment, what this is just a trial before the Senate. That's what impeachment means. And so Andrew Johnson, his trial lasted 11 weeks, and in the end, the Senate could not find him guilty. He was found innocent by one vote, and Andrew Johnson was not a very effective president after this impeachment proceeding. Andrew Johnson was not reelected to the presidency for obvious reasons because he couldn't get along with Congress. All in all, his presidency was not a good one.